both Geeta and Sevanti, I just wanted to ask you both to comment on what are the prospects of balancing what Sevanti so well called the democratization that technology has facilitated with a kind of absurdization, because in one sense what is now called half jokingly WhatsApp University is a form of democratization, but it has also given us a situation where even in social platforms, that is, like a family group or various kinds of groupings that happen on such a platform, there's a race to the bottom, and it has become almost impossible for e- even very well intentioned people to know what is a lie and what is a fact. So, can you both say something about how you visualize uh, this dynamic or this paradox playing out going forward? Because, in a sense, for it to happen in the COVID context was all the more frustrating, because in this case, we needed information that had life and death implications. So, and in itself, the details of the COVID situation ought to have been beyond and above politics. I think it's just brought the fundamental problem into more stark focus.
There are two or three things here. First, obviously, as Shivanti put it beautifully, I mean, this whole question of the democratization of information and communication. So there is this explosion. People are sharing information, and they want to. They want to. There is a desperate desire. There's a need to communicate with one another. So in that process, there's going to be a lot of unverified information also. I'm a little more sympathetic towards it if the intent is innocent in that sense, and people are not doing, sharing wrong information or unverified information without any intention to misinform, without there is no intention to actually, and that would also become a legal situation, I think. So uh, the problem, of course, is that you have a media um, that puts out false information routinely. What do you do with that? Established media houses that are supposed to put out verified information, that take on the role of being journalists. I mean, you had this absurd situation. I mean, you're talking about WhatsApp University, where Times Now started reading out the names of the Chinese soldiers who supposedly died in the Galwan crisis, during that Galwan conflict, and actually it was something that came out from a fake WhatsApp. They actually did that on air. So you have media structures that are supposed to put out authentic, verified information, and they don't do that. That sort of so there was this other place where we were discussing this, and we said that there seems to be an island of verified, accurate information, and the unverified information is actually all over the place. So it should have been the reverse. We should have had islands of unverified information, which we could then isolate and discuss, maybe media literacy, whatever.
I don't know about the islands of verified information. You want to create islands of, is that what you're saying? Well, the thing I talked about, these poor chaps they're not doing fake news. I mean, they are bona fide reporters finding a platform which is free and accessible to just put out regular reporting. And the thing is that they are being dubbed. I mean, now in the COVID situation, whatever came on social media, which may have been good ground level reporting, is being dubbed fake news, because then so then when it's fake news, then there are laws to deal with it, and that is part of the problem, and that resulted in a bunch of affairs and so on. I just want to make a completely separate point when you're talking about falsehoods on WhatsApp. I mean, the entire, I don't know about the first BJP, the first election in 14, but in 2019, leading up to 2019, there's been such a successful malign use of WhatsApp by, what do you call them, all the BJP's, army of thing. And it was really very effective. So political parties using WhatsApp, some using it for completely fake stuff. So we need to look at the importance of that also, because that affects our polity. It really was used. It really did deliver results. There's lots of evidence of that.
Also, the manner in which Facebook, cracks down on dissenting voices, but privileges this particular, that's been, and there is enough evidence of that actually over the years.
Geeta, do you want to say a bit more about that? Because the revelation about Facebook doing so came a little late when your report was almost ready. And strictly speaking, it's not limited to COVID. But do you want to just say something a bit more about that here?
Actually, the report was meant to look at civil liberties and in the media during the lockdown and all of that. So I kind of kept that aside, and that would definitely require a separate report. But the only point I wanted to make is that the charge is that Facebook has privileged members of the BJP, the ruling BJP, and not taken sufficient action against them. But this is something that we've been seeing, in the Hoot also. I mean, Shevanti will remember this. We've documented the way in which Facebook has actually censored people who have complained against misogyny. Women activists who've complained against trolls, they have been penalized. And Facebook does this routinely. So, we've had media houses who've been removed, and many small media outlets use Facebook to amplify their reports. Most of the time their circulation may be very limited, but because they put it out on Facebook, they get a much larger readership. So when Facebook cracks down on them, they actually kill these small media outlets. And they've been doing it for years.
Can I request
Shivanti,
anybody? Yeah.
Shivanti, actually, if you could speak a little bit about the way in which Reliance and the geo connection, which you've written about in this
It doesn't fit into this subject.
It's okay. You can say something about it.
No, yeah. So, in all this excitement over Facebook, they forget, people forget, there's not been enough, what is the word, focus on the building dominance that's going on. If you can't use the word monopoly, because let's say Jio is not a monopoly yet. I mean, you've got other players, but the building dominance that's been going on, and has Facebook and Google conveniently piggybacking on it. Why is it going on? Because all the regulators sort of abdicate, and so if you look at all the sectors, I mean, just look at this whole thing of Jio. The fact that Jio, when did they come? 2016, just 2 or 3 years before the elections. 17 is where they really got going. And you give a free 6-month free offer, launch offer, and before you know what's happening, they have millions. I don't know how many hundred, I don't have the figure right now, but immediately you get that many people on the internet. And yes, this is what I want to explain. So it's a huge favor to the ruling party, because by the time you come along and you want to use WhatsApp and you want to use Facebook, then all over the districts, you have these large number of your voters, constituents, generally voters, not necessarily BJP voters, who are all online for the first time, mobile internet blossoming, because Jio was allowed to do this completely, predatory practice, or whatever you want to call it. So there's this whole other thing of domination building with Facebook, and everybody in the right company, and the government is a beneficiary, and the regulator looks the other way.
Lara's posted a message here.
I actually Thank you, Rajni. I just wanted to ask a question about what we were discussing right now, the nexus between Facebook and the government. We all kind of know about it. Also, the other social media platforms that they're being used to to surveil. There's an infringement of right to privacy, and at the same time, hate speech is being allowed on these platforms. So, what can we do at a larger level to campaign against this? Because it's become so normalized now. We know about it. It's been happening for several years, but somehow I feel that we haven't been, talking about it enough or trying to take some action against it because I don't think this nexus will break unless we do something at a large level. And at the same time, we also have to deal with the argument, of free speech, then of the fact that this is just a platform. So whatever people post, it is their individual liability, and hence the platform has no responsibility towards it. So we're dealing with all these arguments. Also, these are the legal arguments that are posed against this. So what are the ideas? What are the best strategies that we can use?
John, I was both in sort of, I'm adding to Lara's question, and I think maybe if you respond to it before Geeta and Shevanti, that this business about the large response. I know you have ideas about the ways in which we can also leverage technology to create large scale alternative networks. You want to say anything here? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, the paradox is that this meeting is also live on Facebook. And we are, even if you think that Zoom is still seemingly or relatively apolitical platform.
No, I
So,
think we have to accept, first we have to
Can I-
accept that WhatsApp University is a university. And it's a university of common people. And what they think is, in a sense, whether it is false consciousness or not, it is what is the consciousness. So we have to take the issues from that consciousness. I feel that we are on another, we are always talking at another plane, and we are stuck with that logic. We do need to actually see how people are perceiving it, what is their kind of issue, and then, address that. Because I find, like, I'll just give an example, like Madhu, today, she's just put an article in Seminar. I suggest that we should all read it. I mean, for the first time in 4 months, I got a feeling that people were also talking of the positive things that are happening. The way people are communicating with her, she has picked out those things and connected it with all these kind of issues, the reporting, the way the politicians have behaved, and there were the riots and the people were being targeted and things like that. But she has kind of connected that with the consciousness of a large number of people who have actually done things and highlighted them based on her notes. It's in the latest Seminar. I think you can read it. I can also post the link. But I found that as a very important thing, that we have to move our logic, whatever we are telling people, as journalists, as things, from the kind of consciousness, because today we are finding that the people are also producers of information. They are not just recipients of our information. They're producing it, and they're producing it from their consciousness. And therefore it is a reality.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say that, while we're talking about these platforms, the media platforms that have made the most amount of money have been these digital platforms. It's Google or Facebook, and even Zoom. Zoom actually has made a lot of, it's added on many, many more users. And its last quarter was, it's made a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
But the reason why I'm pointing this out is because, we all are in this state of being very passive, sort of passively engaging with these media, with the new media that's coming in. Much as we haven't done that with the legacy media, what we call the legacy media. Yeah, our own engagement is not now, but it has been for several years now. We kind of we make use of Google or Facebook or now WhatsApp or Instagram or all of these or Twitter but we are unable to control in any way what actually, the kind of community standards that they impose. And it's gotten worse over the years.
Well, I was just saying that even earlier mainstream media, our interaction with was pretty passive and one way. That too.
Yeah, we don't have, I don't think any of print media doesn't even carry letters to the editors anymore. Do they have anything like that? Do they have any way in which we can regulate? We
Not
just
really,
failed.
because the press council is so non.
Any questions or any reflections actually from anyone? Because see, the COVID-19 situation is not going away in a hurry. We all know that though things may be looking a little better at the moment, we are told that there will be second and third waves. There is theoretically at least, there's a possibility that there could be, subsequent rounds of lockdown. So it's important, I think, for us to bear in mind that this report is not about something that is over, that is in the past. And so all of the alarm bells that it is ringing will affect our lives definitely for another 8 to 10 months, I'm told, uh, if not more, unless there is some miracle and things improve. So, would anybody like to share any thoughts on what are the kinds of things that we as civil liberties activists should be doing, creative responses that we may have not emphasized or we have overlooked so far?
There's a question here from Sandhya.
Sandhya says there are a number of organizations of journalists. What has happened to those over a period of time? Is there some possibility of what can be done on that front? Who takes a shot at that?
Yeah, well, there are organizations of journalists, and we do have, there are organizations which are trade unions. There are organizations that are associations of journalists, and I think we mentioned in the report, and I think Shevanti also mentioned this, that the Editors Guild, for instance, has been missing in action quite severely. When the recent attacks on journalists by the Caravan journalists, actually, and the News Minute journalists, Editors Guild put out a statement after 2 or 3 days after being asked to, and journalists have criticized the wording of that statement. The Press Council has been selective. It is a statutory body, but it's been so selective in the way it's responded in targeting only some media houses, not looking at the others. So it's not been effective at all. The NBSA is a news broadcasting association for news broadcasters, and again, it's been totally ineffective in even enforcing its own orders. So it's actually quite a bad. So we're in a situation which is really, very grim in that sense. There's absolutely no accountability from within.
No, accountability is one thing. What about protecting what about vulnerability, doing something about that? Because that you have bodies that realize that it's really going to get bad for journalists, worse than it is now, and you're losing whatever agency you had if everyone's going to be attacking you and nobody's going to take them on. So I'm just saying you also need that kind of action. It's not just
Yeah.
True. Okay, there's a comment here from Nupur Basu. Journalist solidarity is at an all-time low thanks to TRP competition. The only way forward is what Shevanti was saying, an alliance of journalists, lawyers, and civil society. This is from Nupur Basu. Would you like to answer this about any glimmers of hope, Shevanti, for these kinds of alliances to get a fair wind in their sails?
No, I mean, I said they needed. Geeta, do you know any building? You remember when we started the Hoot, we thought we were trying to do the, what was it called? We were trying to do that network where you were looking for lawyers at the district level and small town level whom journalists could turn to. And, you know, somehow nothing happened. But I think there's a conscious effort to at least have human rights organizations available at various levels and willing to connect up really, you know, vulnerable journalists with lawyers and so on. Colin, I don't know, Colin did or didn't do, it needs to be done more now.
Yeah, I think we need to strengthen that because journalists at district levels really don't have any kind of, any access to immediate legal care, legal help. So there is absolutely a need for that. I you know, this, we can talk about it, we can definitely work towards it, but that has to happen, that alliance. And like I think like Shivanti also mentioned earlier that we should move away from the cities which you know, where there is a lot of there is some kind of support. But again, you know, look at the state of the journalists from the caravan who have been attacked last month on August 11th. Till today, there has been no FIR lodged, registered in, despite the fact that complaints have been lodged. We have Prashant Kanodia, who's the journalist from Delhi, who was picked up and went to UP. He's still under arrest, and he has still not managed to secure bail.
We have a suggestion here in the chat from Suresh, our General Secretary of PUCL. He says, we need to think out of the box of bringing some control over truant media, which has taken over the rest of the media. Can we organize a citizens forum which can come out with a scoring system of media organizations in terms of their coverage of issues on clearly identified parameters? PUCL can and will come forward to be part of such a collective if such a program can be initiated.
Okay.
What are some of the, I mean, we have about 7 minutes left. Can both of you, you know, maybe just make some observations on, this is a very tangible suggestion. What are some of the, you know, potential hazards or some of the obstacles that such a collective has to be aware of? Because I think what has happened to a lot of efforts is that they are launched in very good faith, but with not a great deal of realism about the terrain into which, you know, they are stepping out. So is there, what would you have to watch out for something like this to be effective?
You know, if you didn't even organize a forum, but if you just got a few people together in an existing organization to agree on a format for a report and just put them out, that report gets, I mean, you write about journalists, they read it. So the grading that we're talking about of credible reports or whatever, it can be done without organizing a citizens forum also. I mean, PUCL can do it, somebody else can do it. You put together a bunch of people, you decide how you're going to format it, and you do it, because even if it's a lot of effort, you can collect money or whatever. Over a period of time, or an issue, you know, you organize it around reporting of an issue. You take completely contrasting levels of media, you take regional media, don't just sit and do Republic TV. And that's the problem, that we think covering the misdeeds of Republic is the end of all reporting. But you look at how the big news, anybody, big Hindi newspapers, anybody, and rate them on these one issue, what kind of a, you know, whatever. Yeah. How much field reporting, how much this, how much that. I mean, that's one way of doing it. You don't have to set up an organization.
Geeta?
You know, there's, I think we need to look a little more closely at the way in which the state operates in terms of providing largesse to the media. So the nexus is very strong and becomes quite dangerous in problem situations, in flashpoint situations. A case in point is what happened in UP with the anti-CAA and the agitations that happened in UP. We had a PUCL meeting, in fact, and some activists who had come from UP were talking about how the journalists who were accredited journalists with the state of UP were supporting the police in identifying victims. So there is this there's this network within and of journalists who who are otherwise seen as legitimate people because they are accredited to the state governments. So it's quite complex, and to be able to then look out for the media, for journalists who are independent, who stand up for journalism and uphold journalistic principles, that becomes a huge task in itself.
Geeta?
Thanks a lot, Rajni and Shivanti. This report is, like you said, not complete in any way, and I guess it will need to be added, and there'll be a lot that one can build on.
Yeah.
And I hope there'll be a lot more input from others who can tell us where we can strengthen it and what we can do with it. Thank you so much.